We'll take you back to one of our top stories on the Iranian tanker that's been released in Gibraltar and speak to Brennan. He's an adjunct professor of Admiralty and International Maritime Law at Fordham University School of Law. He's joining us via Skype from New York. Hi, Brennan. Good to have you with us on the News Hour. So the Iranian ambassador to London, at least, is saying that the U.S. has failed in its attempt to keep the Grey Swan in Gibraltar. What does the U.S. do next? Do they and will they pursue other avenues?
It's not clear. No one has seen the opinion from the court in Gibraltar, nor the U.S. pleadings. The report that I read just before we went on air from another source indicated that the Justice of the Gibraltar Supreme Court said there were no pleadings and no formal request from the United States to seize or continue the attachment or rest of the ship. So it's not clear. If there were a formal proceeding, if the court denied the U.S. request, perhaps the U.S. could appeal. But if the U.S. did not file formal pleadings, I do not know how they could appeal. So
do you think that does this then end the U.S.'s attempts? Does it just leave it there?
Well, it's not possible to tell.
Right.
If defaulted in the proceedings, no possibility of arresting the ship there, but there could be other friendly ports. We don't know where the ship is going, but I think we can be confident that the U.S. and other nations will follow that ship closely by multiple means and know exactly where it's going and see that the Iranian government honors its agreement with the court that the oil will not be delivered to Syria. I assume that means delivered directly or indirectly.
What about the British flag tanker, the Stena Impero, which was seized by Iran shortly after the Grey Swan was seized? Does this British ship now get released? Do you see Iran doing that as a sort of a goodwill gesture? What are UK authorities getting in return for releasing the Grey Swan?
An important question. The public comments have been that there was no quid pro quo. Iran effectively admitted that it seized Stena Impero in retaliation for the seizure of Grey Swan. The crew members of Grey Swan apparently have been released before today. That's a Manning problem. I don't know how the Iranian owners are going to deal with it. If the Iranians fail to release Stena Impero and her crew, then that will not put them in good standing in the international community. There were allegations of a small maritime port. That could have been resolved with a simple letter of undertaking or a promise by the ship owner and its insurers to pay the claim if there was, in fact, damage done by the ship to an Iranian fishing ship. The longer Stena Impero remains held in Iran, the more bad will and appearance of hostage holding that the world will see.
But if you look at the bigger picture here, and specifically the ruling by the Gibraltar court just a few hours ago, does this actually escalate tensions in a region that's seen plenty of hostilities, you can say, over the past few months?
The region's seen plenty of hostilities at sea over 40 years and more. And that's part of the complexity. This is one of the steps. Is it a factor that could reduce? Yes, but Iran has made multiple statements indicating that it does not want warships of any other nation involved in the area. That's a violation of freedom of navigation. It's a response to allegations and threats made by Iran and conduct by Iran for the past 90 days that have put ships at risk, have caused hundreds of millions of dollars of damage to neutral ships and its cargo. So there needs to be de-escalation, but it can't be unilateral. And it's Iran's turn to step forward and either begin by releasing the crew and the ship and the cargo on Stena Impero, and then make assurances that freedom of navigation rights in the Strait of Hormuz, the Gulf of Oman, and in the Persian Gulf will be fully and carefully respected. And that also needs to be extended to aircraft, particularly commercial aircraft transiting that.
All right, Brennan, we thank you for joining us from New York.
Thank you.
Now, the pilots of a Russian airliner are being hailed as heroes for saving lives by crash landing in a cornfield. The Ural Airlines Airbus hit a flock of seagulls shortly after takeoff from Zhukovsky Airport in Moscow. All 233 people on board escaped. 23 were taken to hospital with minor injuries. Aviation safety specialist David Learmont says the crash has similarities with the so-called Miracle on the Hudson in New York 10 years ago.
It would have been pretty shocking, but it didn't for very long. And although I think a couple of people got minor injuries in the incident, it was, everybody lived. And the closest comparison we have to an event like this is one almost exactly 10 years ago, when a US Airways Airbus landed on the Hudson River, actually on a river. But exactly, one of the most famous incidents of all time, actually, for aviation. Again, a couple of people got hurt, but nobody was killed. And it was exactly the same cause. It was both engines were hit by, in this case, it was a flock of geese, and the pilots lost power, almost all power on both engines, as happened in this case.
6 EU countries have agreed to take in almost 150 migrants who have been stranded on a ship for 2 weeks. They've been on the Open Arms charity vessel after being picked up off Libya. Italy's Interior Minister Matteo Salvini had blocked that boat from docking. The passengers will now go to France, Germany, Romania, Portugal, Spain and Luxembourg.